There's physical, the sensations, there's emotions that need to move. And what you tend to find is once the physical body opens up, and that comes part with the release of this held emotion, then it's as if we have this channel and we're plugged in into this transcendent experience. And for myself, I didn't really understand what transcendence was. And I'd done enough meditation, but I'd just sit there waiting for something to happen, and nothing would. And it wasn't until I started breathwork that gave me a reference point of, oh, wow, that. You mentioned the roller coaster. It's like, yeah, the physical change, maybe the emotional shift, and poof, then I'm somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Junction of something, nothing, and everything. Mm-hmm. Getting really plugged in and not really realizing until you come back.
Hey there. I just had one of those conversations that literally changed the way I breathe. I sat down with the amazing Stuart Sandeman. He's a breathwork coach who's worked with everyone from BBC to Google, and who discovered something most of us never realize. We're walking around holding our breath, holding our emotions, and holding our stress. Stuart's journey started with grief. He lost his best friend and couldn't quite process it until a breathwork breakthrough, which allowed him to shift, ultimately connecting him with a deeply spiritual experience. Now he helps people unlock freedom through breath. In this conversation, I was reminded that breathwork is one of the most powerful shortcuts to relaxation. We're literally just one relaxed breath away from transformation. You'll hear Stuart break down the science, CO2's role, oxygen shifts, and why breathwork can feel almost psychedelic. A fair warning here, I found myself breathing deeper right into the microphone. You might too. Plus, Stuart has kindly offered a free week of complete access to breathpod, his platform, along with a 20% off of your first year should you decide to go on. If you want to feel more alive and shift your nervous system in real time, this episode's for you. All right, breathers, let's do this. All right, Stuart Sandeman, welcome to the Adventures in Wellbeing podcast.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, man. In preparation for this and getting to know you and getting to know your work, there is something that really lights up in me when I see somebody who has found something that is so much more than just a career or, a financial path, and is a passion and is so clearly in your heart and in your and on your path, I guess. So I just want to acknowledge that and seeing that in you, and really enjoying connecting with people like you. So thank you for joining us again.
No, it's so nice to hear. Yeah. And it's refreshing to hear as well. Because some people go into things maybe for the wrong reasons.
All sorts, which is, maybe sometimes that's the path too. So it's all the path.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Yeah.
Hey, so start us off with what you would say to a skeptic. I'm sure every once in a while you meet people, they've never done a touch of breath work, and you tell them a little bit about what you're doing. When you kind of sense that somebody is a bit, what do you say to them?
You know what? I love skeptics. I think skepticism gets bad rep, but skepticism is questioning the narrative. And I think that's really important. I think we all should be skeptics across things, but that's not saying we close off. So a level of skepticism, I think, is important to question why we're doing things, or what will things work for me, or what is this? Is this correct? Is this not? But being open to be able to change your mind. I think that's what the key thing is. I love skeptics, because if somebody said to me, just breathe, in my younger years, I probably wouldn't have listened, and I would have thought that doesn't make much sense. I'm doing it already. And I get that a lot. I'm already breathing. Yeah. So usually I come at that level. I say, well, if you're doing something 20,000 times a day, Would you not want to know if you're doing it right or doing it optimally? If you're doing any task 20,000 times a day, would you not want to check in and just see, am I doing it? Especially something so important as breathing, which we all know if we don't breathe, we're no longer here. So that's usually the level I enter with the skepticism to say, well, let's just have a look. Let's see what's going on here. Give me a couple of minutes just to see how you're breathing, and then we can go from there.
Cool. So you would kind of dive into maybe even just subtly watching their breath or something like that, or kind of engaging with like, how's it going for you over there in that body?
Yeah, I think it's so important. I think we all have dysfunctional breathing patterns throughout our life, because our body's doing its best with the cues it's got. So I think understanding those and then knowing that we have a choice and can change the way we breathe is so empowering for people. And the way we breathe then triggers how we feel. So taking control and understanding some of those things is so empowering and can make a monumental change in your life.
What do you think comes first? I guess the environment that puts us into dysfunctional breathing patterns, or is it that breathing patterns just kind of can get stuck and sticky, and then that creates, say, the response or the emotions or the stuckness on the inside?
It can go either way. Yeah, either way. So we can learn bad habits from a very young age. We actually learn from our parents or caregivers, our breathing patterns. You'll find that it can be generational. If your parents are upper thoracics or chest dominant breathers, then it's more likely that you might form that pattern and then be more prone to anxiety or prone to stress. Or you can have an impactful experience and hold your breath, have a breath holding patterns to keep yourself safe through that. And our breath just holds and clings on until we feel safe enough for it to open. So it can be either way. We can have an experience. We could learn from our surroundings in a dysfunctional way. It might be something else. It could be something postural or maybe through injury. So it could be physical, it could be mental, emotional, or it could just be environmental.
When we have those moments that make us hold our breath, I certainly was relating to a couple of moments in my life that stood out. Is it that because those moments are often quite impactful and intense, that the body kind of holds on to that pattern a little bit, and maybe that perceived lack of safety or that perceived risk in the world then gets embodied in the breath pattern and sticks?
Yeah, it can be. Again, there's a number of different reasons we would have a breath hold. And when we're talking about breath holds, we're talking about sort of unconscious holding patterns that are as a stress response. One thing that is quite key in the work that I do is we hold our breath to stop ourselves from feeling. So that's the emotional side. So if something came up, let's say anything on the emotional spectrum, it could be joy, laughter, but it wasn't appropriate to burst out laughing. To stop the natural flow of emotion, energy and motion, we stop that motion part of that energy flow by holding our breath. So that we hold our breath back to stop the laughter. Mm-hmm. And it could be the anger. We hold our breath back to stop the anger. We hold our breath back to stop the stress. And we hold our breath back to stop the tears if we have bad news and we got to hold it together. So that can be one form of breath holding patterns. We're holding our breath to stop the natural flow of emotion. And then the energy in motion, which is what emotion is, something triggers the emotion. We have a change in chemistry in our body. And then we have to balance that out with some sort of reaction. Usually our breath moves and then we have an emotional outburst. But if we think either consciously or unconsciously, it's not appropriate to feel, we hold our breath and in essence, we trap that emotion. We don't give it its full integration cycle. So then we're holding on. We're holding on with tension in our body because we've taken physical tension to hold the emotion in space, in place. And that physical tension then changes our breathing pattern. So the breathing pattern, the cue that the breath is then sending to our brain might not be the exact cue about our environment, because that's what it's usually doing. It's saying, checking for cues, sending signals of safety to our brain or sending signals of stress to our brain through the breath pattern. So when we have these holding patterns, then we're almost changing the information we sent to our brain from our breath. So that can be one reason. And it's probably the most popular reason I see people with breath holding patterns. because they've had an experience where they've not fully felt, and the process of not feeling is a contraction in the breathing cycle.
I'm connecting with the idea that, or just kind of the noticing that so many people that I meet, myself included, actually, like if I'm watching a movie and I feel some big emotions coming, there's some part of me that just like doesn't want to allow myself to really sob or really kind of feel whatever it is. And do you have a sense that that's learned? Or, I mean, because on the other side of that, God, it feels so good. Like when I've had a good cry or when I've really just kind of let that out, whether it be sadness or whether it be tears of joy and, that just kind of cracking open feeling. I mean, in some ways, there's nothing better than what's on the other side. You're saying that essentially we learn that as a kind of a protective mechanism and it gets kind of locked into the breath pattern.
Yeah, and you're spot on. It is a learned thing. I often say babies are the breathing gurus. So if you watch a baby breathe, its diaphragm's engaged, it's breathing through its nose, everything's open and firing correctly, unless obviously there's been a breathing complication at birth. But generally speaking, babies are the breathing gurus. They're also very free in their emotions.
You're so right. Like moment to moment, eh?
Yeah. They cry. That's their form of expression before verbal cues. And we'll see that emotional freedom maybe till you're about a toddler. And then whether it's the terrible twos or something like that. And then they start to have some discipline put into them. No, that's not right. Or we start to realize, even with the baby, we get shushed. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry.
Mm.
So we start to create this belief. It's not okay to fully feel. It's not okay to cry. And some of those are important cues. It's not okay to cry if your supermarket doesn't have your favorite ice cream. But we start to create this controlling mechanism, and the way we control those emotions is through our breath. I'm not saying now just go off and be completely free in your emotions and laugh and cry and all sorts. I mean, that probably wouldn't be a bad thing for your body, but we can use it in our practice in a safe space to allow things to move through us when we're moving through challenging moments in life, and we all experience challenge, to have this place that we can go to within ourselves to feel in a daily practice, or maybe a deeper dive session where you just need to let go of some of that stuff that we're holding on to. Because life can get challenging. We go through different experiences and it creates tension in our body. And if we allow that tension to move, then we have more space and more capacity for all the good experiences and feeling love and joy and feeling lighter.
Walk me through what this looks like in a session. So when you're doing this work, is it usually group or is it one-on-one?
I do both. I work one-to-one and I work in groups. I do stuff online and things as well. Now, there's a couple of different ways I'd access this depending on how somebody's breathing. For me, it's always understanding, or where's the breath flowing? Or more accurately, where's the breath not flowing? So when I see somebody breathe, understand, right, what's their breathing pattern? What's their breathing archetype that they've fallen into? I say archetype because many people have these common patterns of breath. So how are they breathing? And what's so fascinating is how a person breathes then starts to paint a picture about how they're operating in the present moment in their life. And I find that so fascinating. After nearly a decade of doing this work, it still amazes me every single time when somebody comes to me and says one thing, and then I watch them breathe and I go, wait, your breath is saying something else here. And that might be a grief pattern. Even they said, I can't sleep. I'm coming to you because I can't sleep. And then I watch them breathe and I'm like, you're holding on to grief. Did somebody pass in your life? Oh, my dad passed 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you're still holding on to that. And you can see where the breath is not flowing in certain areas, whether it's the feminine side, the masculine side, the different areas where they're holding tension in the breathing cycle. So for me, it's about actually opening up into that space. What has caused them to close that area down? What protection mechanism have they held on? So it could be up in the chest, maybe breathing with their diaphragm fine, but they've closed down their heart space. It could be the opposite. They could have tension in their diaphragm or tension in their lower abdominal, and that's creating so much tension that they're breathing only in their chest. So for me, a session will firstly I like to come in it quite wide in terms of investigation. What's going on for somebody? And we're talking very much about emotional side of things here, but it might be physical as well. It could be posture. It could be the stressful moment has become the stressful year and they've just formed a bad habit of breathing. And that might just be to do with the chemistry of their body, because breathing is about carbon dioxide and oxygen and chemistry. So I kind of come in it with a curious mind, whether that's a workshop, whether that's individually. How's somebody breathing? Get them to breathe, close their eyes and just breathe. What's their natural resting breath like? Because we can tell a lot by the natural resting breath. If the natural resting breath is not calm, relaxed, using the diaphragm, then I start to do a few tests, checking the carbon dioxide. So go down that kind of physical and chemical route, and then also just start working with their breath. Number of different ways I'll work with somebody, and it really depends on what the process of eliminations happened in that first awareness exercise. Now, it might mean somebody needs to slow down their breath, or it might need a more detailed process, which I think is where you're questioning on how does that look? There's a load of different ways to breathe. We can slow our breath down to move into a very relaxed parasympathetic state, or we can speed our breath up to move into a more heightened sympathetic driven state. And there's practices that do both, and they're both very, very beneficial. The amazing thing about breathwork is loads of people are now talking about it, but it's a big umbrella. There's lots of different practices. It's like saying yoga, but you've got all these different types of yoga, and breathwork's quite similar. So when we're working in more the emotional processing style of breathwork, a more integrative approach, it actually uses a more activating breath pattern, super ventilating pattern. So we're breathing fuller, we're breathing deeper, we're maybe breathing a little bit quicker than usual to create a big shift in the body, to change the chemistry in the body. The body moves, we drop carbon dioxide. I like to do it personally. My approach is doing it in a very gentle way. I know there's many breath practices that will get you breathing really hard, like shamanic breath practices and things. For me, the real action, or what I'm looking for, is usually on the out breath. In-breath is important. Where is it flowing? Where are we opening up our breath? Are we breathing using our diaphragm? Is it opening up from there as a wave, sort of belly, opening up midsection up into the chest? And then for me, the real action happens on the out breath. Is the out breath just relaxed? Does it just drop out? Does it drop out without any force, without any control?
That's what you want, eh?
That's
a really
what
relaxed exhale.
Really relaxed exhale, but different from maybe the yogic relaxed exhale, because you can control your exhale and feel relaxed.
Mm.
And I teach a lot of these techniques. Let's say we breathed in for 4 seconds and held for 4 seconds and breathe out through our mouth for 8 seconds. We've got a controlled in-breath. We've got a controlled pause. We've got a controlled out-breath. And that out-breath is double the length of our in-breath, which will slow your heart rate down and move you into a calm state. So it's a really, really important tool to have if you're feeling stressed or anxious, or you can't sleep, or you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed or panicked. Jumping in and doing that will take control of your system and, in essence, put a bit of a plaster on what you're experiencing. And you can practice that over and over and over, and your system will start to calm down, which is amazing. And I think it's so, so important and empowering to have these tools. But if it's something a little bit deeper, what's causing me to be triggered into that response? That's the bit that I get really excited by. Why is the brain triggered into that stress response in that moment? And for me, this goes a little bit deeper, and it's about how our brain is wired, our belief systems around our environment, our cues, our stress cues, and how our breath is triggered. Now, some of these deeper practices, especially of releasing that exhale, is where we let go of the controlling pattern. So when I say releasing the exhale, instead of having this sort of in, hold, out that's controlled, or in and out that's forced, it's the sweet spot between force and control on the out breath. And it's beautiful when you see it. It just drops away. And I just love watching somebody fall into that pattern because it's really surrendering and trusting with life. It's just full trust in life, like a balloon just letting go itself. We're not,
and just lingering in that long exhale.
yeah, well,
Love
it's not
that.
even, it doesn't even have to be that long exhale because it's almost like the sigh.
Mm-hmm.
It just drops out. It's not that's doing something, we're pushing, we're forcing, and it's not that's a controlling.
Yeah.
It's where the muscles just completely relax and it drops out. And that is the real beauty, because when somebody falls into that state in the practice, we've got the action happening on the in-breath. That's them saying, yes, I'm here, I choose to breathe in this body. The out-breath says, I let go, I surrender. I let go and I just trust. I trust in the universe or whatever that belief pattern is, but it's just full trusting in life. And that's really where we have this big release for people, because it's letting go, a real letting go of what that tension is held in the body.
For those listening who may not have done breath work of this type, just to give it some context, I would imagine you're sitting in groups where people are really working with the deepest of the deep, memories and traumas. And I know in your book, you say something along the lines of trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. And I know that I've had personal conversations around this kind of topic. And, maybe if we want to step it back from, the trauma zone and we just kind of take it as hardship, because I think, all of us can relate to difficult memories or difficult moments that have happened in our lives. What we're saying is that it's not what's happened outside of me. It's what happened inside of me as a response. And then what you're doing is you're taking people into these places, in a sense, unconsciously, through breath work, and allowing these spaces to kind of process or to move through. And so I guess what I was interested in there is, you and I are talking about these breathwork patterns that are kind of, just inhale and exhale. But what I know of these spaces is that they are some of the most transformative spaces I've ever been in. So I guess I just wanted to hear a little bit from your perspective. Why is it so profound? Why is it that something so simple as controlling our breathwork pattern for 20 or 40 minutes, how is that the gateway to such powerful work?
The quote you shared from my book was maybe me quoting Gabor in my book.
Okay, got it.
And it's a really lovely quote, because I often use myself as an example I'll talk about this, and then we'll talk about the actual breath practice. But I came into this work through grief. I lost my girlfriend very tragically to cancer at quite a young age. And I was moving through that grieving process in the best way I knew how. I didn't know breathwork, had never heard of breathwork, probably would have never breathed if somebody told me to. But I took my mum for Mother's Day to a breathing class. And it was one of these sessions that you're talking about here. Unknowingly, I thought it was going to be just like sit and chill out. I thought it'd be some yoga thing. And had a very profound experience, a huge release, a very cathartic release. It was so helpful for me. Felt like the weight of grief was pulled off me. And I had a very spiritual experience as well. I felt like my girlfriend was there holding my hand. So that's what made me come back to breath work, because I thought, right, something very special happened here, and it was beyond my usual way of thinking or anything. And I thought it was like you shared, it was such a beautiful, powerful, sad, loving experience. And yes, you could say I was going through the trauma of grief of losing somebody. But actually, the trauma that I was really experiencing through my grieving process was the belief big boys don't cry. So my real trauma, yes, grief was really sad, but I didn't know how to process the emotion. So it was trapped. And when I say I didn't know how to process the emotion, I didn't know how to let go of the real grief. I could be angry. That was okay in my mind. And I could withdraw. So I had these two emotions of slamming doors and punching walls, or just not leave my bedroom. And that was my grieving. Both of those I would do in a confined space, and I wouldn't let people see me because I'd grown up with this notion of strength, which I thought was a good thing. I did martial arts my whole life. I was on a judo mat at 4 years old, teddy bear called Tough Ted, grew up in Scotland and had built this persona, this belief, big boys don't cry. And I know many guys can maybe relate to that as well. So for me, that was the reason the trauma was so hard for me, because I didn't know how to express myself in a way that was optimal for the grieving process, which is allowing that grief to flow in an emotional sense and being safe enough or vulnerable enough to just let it flow. Now, what's happening in these style of breathwork practices, there's lots of things that happen. Although we're just breathing, we're breathing in a certain way that shifts the body and shifts the mind. We're opening up into these spaces. So physically opening up our breath into the spaces that I mentioned we've closed down. We're changing the chemistry in our body. We're also giving ourselves permission to relax that out breath. So we're stimulating the body because the breath becomes more sympathetic, or the nervous system moves into sympathetic drive. But we're also then moving into a very calm mindset because we're relaxing the exhale. In essence, creating a little bit of confusion, maybe the wrong word, but we're creating this shift in the body where the body says, right, okay, we're activated, but the mind's doing this. There's some changes that happen. We drop carbon dioxide quite dramatically. And because carbon dioxide drops, carbon dioxide is needed at the cell so oxygen can be offloaded. So when we drop carbon dioxide in these practices, the oxygen we're breathing in, and a lot of people say we're oxygenating our body. Not necessarily, because we're breathing in, but we're dropping carbon dioxide so the oxygen doesn't get dropped off at the cell. We drop oxygen levels to our brain. And we can then have this experience where things happen, things shift, and we have releases, we have change in brain waves. There was a lot of recent research to show that those types of breath work, your brain waves move incredibly fast. And there's some schools of thought that say this is exposure therapy to stress because we're stressing ourselves. I don't think it is that. It's allowing ourselves to shift and change what's happening in our brain. And we switch off the default mode network because we're overstimulating the body. Now, that seems like, why would you want to overstimulate the body? There's two ways to switch off the default mode network. One is to understimulate, which is through meditation. Dropping everything down, slowing everything down. The default mode network is where we ruminate. It's what a lot happens, sort of anxieties when we're stuck in that state. Mm-hmm. So this practice is whether you're slowing things down, or in this case, ramping things up to a level where we're overstimulating, it switches this part of our brain off, which means we go into deeper states of awareness. There's also, because of what's happening with the chemistry and the carbon dioxide and oxygen levels, we do also release this DMT from our pineal gland, which a lot of people experience as well, which is why people always think that's this sort of drug, but it's something that happens when we dream at night as well. So we can move into this part of our unconscious mind quite quickly, where we can get deep resolution. So we're having this very physical experience, a lot of chemistry change happening in the body, which is triggering our mind to shift and change. And from that, there's a lot of chemical change that's happening in the brain, and people can access parts of their brain that aren't there readily accessed day to day. And this is where our processing can come into play. It's incredible, really, that we do have this tool that we can call upon in a safe environment. And sometimes we'd need a trained instructor as well to kind of guide us through that process, especially with something like trauma, so that we can move through it in a safe way. Mm-hmm. But it is really quite incredible that we can access these layers of consciousness ourselves through breathing patterns.
Do you have any recommendation if somebody knows that they're holding quite a bit of trauma? Would you invite them into the same space as somebody who's just interested in breath work and maybe not holding too much trauma?
I think the most important thing is finding a facilitator that you feel safe with. And I think a good facilitator will be able to hold that space well, depending on whatever's in the room. And I think that's really key. And that kind of opens the door. It's amazing. Breathwork is having its time and people are using it a lot, but there's also some fast track training schools that you'll learn breathwork in a weekend, and it's not possible you might learn some ways of using our breath, but the training is actually with people. How do we hold space for people? How do we navigate when people are going through the depths of real trauma? And how do we help them afterwards in a really safe way? And I think that's important. So for myself, I'd never know who's booked a ticket come in the door unless it's advertised, certainly in a way, in a nuance that says this is for this. Sometimes I'll do sessions that are definitely just more music led, like I did one at the last weekend. My intention was not trauma release at all. It was a deep experience, but it was a beautiful experience. And the breath still, for people, when they sit and breathe in a certain way, opens up things for them. So I think also what happens, I often find when people have high expectations that I'm going to go and release this today, it doesn't always happen that way. It doesn't always flow that way as easy as we think. So you'll find that some people might come to a session thinking, oh, I'm just going to go and do, myself included, when I went to that session, when I was grieving, I had no intention I was there for my mum and I didn't expect any of it, but it was exactly what I needed at that time. So I think back to your question, it's really about doing a bit of homework around whoever you're doing the session with, and knowing that whatever comes up for you, that person is able to hold your hand through that process.
Do you think it's still okay to do, say, online if you choose a great facilitator? I know I've done some breath work online and I really enjoyed it and was surprised how effective it was just to lie in my bed in my room and to be facilitated. I still had quite a powerful experience. But also, I guess nothing major came up. I didn't need any integration. I didn't need anyone to talk to afterwards. So yeah, I guess, are you aware of any online programs that have a particular format that you like?
We do our own online sessions. And again, I do a monthly, the first Wednesday of every month. I do an online session now, and I talk through this process. And again, I really try to create a safe space for that. So I'm there, I'm live, I'm on the chat. We have other, Nova, my partner who works with me, she's there as well, just to keep an eye on anything. And when we are breathing, you will only breathe to a place that you're ready to go to, because ultimately you're still in control. And I'll explain that to people on an online session. You can stop. If you're feeling something uncomfortable, stop. If you maybe intuitively know this feels uncomfortable, but I'm going somewhere that I need to feel, that's okay too. So it's taking responsibility for yourself and for your breath, knowing that if something uncomfortable happens, you could just stop the practice and take a break. But equally, understanding, well, is that my pattern? Do I stop when something's uncomfortable?
Yeah.
So being really honest and aware of your own triggers, your own patterns in your life, and understanding, I can go to this place. I'm here, I'm helped, I'm supported. And again, we give just as much support for those sessions as we do in person if you're having an experience. Because sometimes what happens is you have the breath session, and maybe it's 2 or 3 days later that you're like, oh, since that breath session, I feel like I've maybe opened Pandora's box a little bit, and I'm feeling a little bit vulnerable, or I'm feeling emotional and I'm moving through something and I need a bit of help and advice. Then the door's open, just drop us an email. And I think that's what's so important. It's not just like, all right, off you go out into the world, because these sessions, these deeper practices just crack us open. And then we've knocked down the wall, the barrier, but it's about then rebuilding. Well, what have I've moved through something. Now, how do I take back control of what I've done now to rewire how I'm operating? What change can I make? Otherwise, I just fall back into the same patterns. So it's about changing the breath pattern and opening up the breath, but then it's also about then using conscious awareness, using the mind, the mindset to work through some of these things, which is why I often think something like breathwork and therapy go beautifully hand in hand, because the breathwork can open you up and really have this monumental shift, in my experience, quicker than words can, quicker than conversation. Not always, but a lot of times. But then it's about trying to make sense of what's happened and putting those pieces together and then using the breath as you go through that process.
Do you guys see that as well, where you combine the two?
Yeah, I do on my one-to-one programs.
That makes sense.
In group sessions. It's hard to, but like I said, our door's always open, whether that's through our social media channels or through our email channels. We always try and help people as best as we can.
I must say, I'm often surprised by the state that a fairly short breathwork practice can get me to. There's a bit of a roller coaster in there. There's a bit of resistance. There's a bit of kind of like, work to be done. But in a fairly short period of time, the direct experience of a default mode network dropping off is, bliss. It's really just such a beautiful state of relaxed presence. And you get this amazing kind of tingling, full body, sort of energetic sort of glow going on, which is, I would say, very unique, and even though I've reached some beautiful states in meditation as well, there's a signature that feels kind of unique to breathwork, and it just feels quite approachable and quite available. Yeah. And quite psychedelic. I mean, you touched on DMT there, and I think that definitely seems to be part of it, that there's a period of altered state in there. I mean, I sometimes feel like I leave my body. I leave the room. Like I'm no longer there. In fact, that's happened to me several times. Sometimes the room's almost like packing up and leaving, and I'm still coming back in.
Amazing.
But it's powerful.
That is exactly it. There's physical, the sensations, there's emotions that need to move. And what you tend to find is once the physical body opens up, and that comes part with the release of this held emotion, as if we have this channel and we're plugged in into this transcendent experience. And for myself, I didn't really understand what transcendence was. And I'd done enough meditation, but I'd just sit there waiting for something to happen, and nothing would. And it wasn't until I started breathwork that gave me a reference point of, oh, wow, that. You mentioned the roller coaster. It's like, yeah, the physical change, maybe the emotional shift, and then I'm somewhere else. Junction of something, nothing, and everything. Getting really plugged in and not really realizing until you come back. You think, wow, I've just been there. And in that place, you get deep resolution, a lot of peace, a lot of love. It's like connecting to a long lost part of yourself that feels so familiar in that space and so beautiful. When I had those experiences through breathwork, then when I'd go back to meditate, I'd have little glimpses of it. And then, it was like beforehand, I didn't know what the reference point. And then breathwork allowed me to sort of go, this is it. And I think that's a really nice way, because it's not always about emotion. We work through those emotions. We can use it to work through challenge. But like yourself, that sharing there, for myself, I'll just go into that practice just to have that space to connect, to really connect. Maybe I'll come in with an intention or a question that I'm chewing over and think, this is my intention. This is what I'm working on. And I'll breathe and then I'll finish and I'll have that answer to that problem. And it feels really nice. Well, not often what I expect the answer to be.
The idea that you can have these, even if you just have, a few moments of these states of consciousness, that you then know that they're there, and that it's almost like you've walked the path, and however you got there once, the second time's a little easier. That thing is quite cool, eh? So how do you take that, these states that are just really seem invaluable. And how do you weave them into the day-to-day? I mean, obviously we can bring our awareness to our breath at any time. What is a typical day like for you? Are there practices that you recommend people just kind of weave into the more mundane aspects of their day?
For me, one of the more important things of all of this is having a daily practice. And for me, that's a morning practice. And most people that I work with is a morning practice. And having that moment to set yourself up in a proactive state for your day ahead, instead of waking up, the alarm goes off, you rush out the door and you're already in this reactive nervous system's jacked up and you're moving through your day in that way. So having a daily practice, how that daily practice looks might change depending on what you are focusing on in that moment or that chapter in your life. If you are moving through something, maybe you will be doing a connected breath, a more dynamic breath like we talked about. If you're working through a challenge, or maybe you're wanting to have that amplified state and move into that. Or maybe you want to just wake up and do something simple like box breathing, because that will just balance your nervous system out and get your mindset in a flow state before starting your day. Or maybe you've been waking up feeling anxious. Now, you might know exactly what that is, or you might be unsure and you need to just tone things down in the morning. So again, it's tailored to what you need. What do I need in the morning? I do a lot of morning sessions on our app now. We used to do loads on Instagram as well. And we use different themes. So just helping people think, well, I can work on something for a period of time, a theme that lasts a month. This month, my focus is nervous system regulation. And we think, right, what am I going to do every morning to optimize that part of my process? So yeah, morning practice for me is a must before you leave the house. Not always possible when some things land, but pretty much most days. And my morning practice extends from my breathwork practice. Like most people, I move my body. So sort of waking up, breath. At the end of my breath sessions, I always have some sort of gratitude, and then also mentally rehearse my day. What would I like to happen that day? Or is there something that would make today a win? And I just sit in that space and think, oh, that would be it. And again, it's not usually work related or what would make today great. It might just be, you know what, moving through today, feeling a bit calmer, or getting that one thing done that is just that one thing. And that would make my day a win. I have a tendency personally to pack too much in my day. And then the end of the day, sometimes I feel unrealistically set goals for the day, and sometimes get to the end of the day and start to feel bad that I've not done everything I've done, but it was unrealistic anyway. So that practice of saying, what is the one thing for me? If that gets done, the day's a win. I was recently reading something that was saying actually just switching that all together, which I love. I've not started doing it myself yet, but it was around actually your happiness levels. What would make me feel happy today? And instead of being action on doing, which is where a lot of us are, is actually just levels of happiness in the day. Sorry, I digress. So what does my day look like? I have that morning practice of breath of some sort. I do pair that with meditation. I usually use the breath to clear the mind, and then I'll sit in stillness. I'll do some gratitude and I'll think about my day. And then I'll usually head to the gym. My day after that can change depending what's in the diary. We launched our app this year.
Imagine, you're ticking through your day and all of a sudden somebody says that thing, they're in a mood and they're directing it at you and it's a bit spicy. Does breathwork come into moments like that for you, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The key thing in that is the pause. Taking the pause and breathing. That form of breath work just gives you space to respond instead of react. If we just react straight off that trigger, then we're just working from that monkey mind, that primal instinct. And we usually say something that we regret or that creates more fire in the situation. And we can always just take a moment. We don't need to react straight away. And I think if that's just one breath and then choosing a response, we get a much better outcome from the situation. So yeah, I do that all the time.
So different. I almost think, the practice of choosing to breathe, of taking breath from autonomic to conscious, it's almost like you're flexing the muscle of what you were just talking about, because the difficult thing, at least for me, is to become aware that I'm becoming aroused and to take the pause and take some space or some breath. I suspect it seems like breath work even just the practice of breath work is connected to that, just like meditation is connected to that thing of becoming conscious of the unconscious.
That is the key part. What makes you, I get very fascinated about. Why do you do the things you do? And why are you triggered in that situation versus somebody who wouldn't be? And this goes back, if we look at our breath as the stress response trigger. So the threat comes into the room. We see the threat. So the tiger's there. Our senses pick up the tiger. We hear the roar. We maybe smell it. So all our senses pick up and we move into our flight response and we respond. We leg it. We fight off the tiger or we freeze. So that reaction, very key, very primal. I often talk about switching the tiger to the dog. If a dog comes in the room, one person sees the dog and their brain sees the dog and sends a signal to the breath of excitement. And the breath opens and expands and they run towards the dog. They go, what's the dog's name? Scratch behind the ears. Somebody else sees the dog and the fear response. It's like the tiger's come in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the exact same situation happening, but two very different responses in the moment. One of excitement, of joy, of love, of expansion. One of fear, of contraction, of freezing.
What a great analogy. I love that.
And why would somebody be scared of a dog and somebody excited by the dog?
Mm-hmm. The same dog.
The same dog.
Mm.
Well, it's usually because of our past. A felt experience. A dog barked at you at 3 years old. Your brain fired a pathway. Dogs are not safe becomes the belief. And when you see the dog, before you even consciously think about it, your brain triggers it's a threat and you avoid the dog.
Mm.
What also happens is, because of these deep wired beliefs from our childhood, it actually filters into our brain, our reticular activating system, which is the part of our brain that filters out the world because there's so much stimulus going on around us. There's so many things that we're computing. So through this filtering system, we make sense of our world, but we make sense of our world through the cues that we've given it. So in many ways, I like to think of it, we download our manual on how to operate in the world. And then that's the manual that we see things. So for somebody that has the belief dogs are not safe, they actually see the playful jump as a vicious attack. It jumped at me. Where somebody who sees them as loving and caring and their best friend says, it's just jumped and look how lovely that is.
Mm-hmm.
Because their brain has had the filtering system, the cues in it logged in to say, watch out for this.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually experience things differently depending on our past, depending on our belief systems. So it's understanding that your reality is your reality because of what's gone on before. And this is how your brain's working, but it is something that can change. And our breath is the gateway into the unconscious mind. It's like the key to unlock the door. So using your breath in those moments throughout the day, but also just understanding what made me be triggered in that moment. Why am I so angry at that person saying that thing to me? When has this happened in my past? Mm-hmm. And we can start to open the door and really inquire, where do I feel it in my body? Oh, I feel it here. Okay. What did my breath do in that moment? Especially if it's something we're realizing this is not helping me at all. Or if somebody else has said, maybe your closest partner or something said, you always get really stressed at that thing, that person's email. What is it about that? And then we can start to inquire, well, why is that thing stressing me out so much? Or why is that thing triggering me in a certain way that brings out a part of me that I'm not really enjoying? And a part of me that I know isn't my best self, a part of me that I really don't want to subscribe to anymore. And if we can use our breath in those moments, we take a pause, we don't react the same. So we start to change how we're actually operating in the moment. And then we can inquire a little bit deeper.
It's such a powerful practice. Hey, it's such a nice entry point into just being self-aware. Do you ever experience or witness people, or have you seen in yourself or others the idea of kind of spiritual sidestepping?
Absolutely. And I think it's about avoiding feeling and allowing, like, we're here to be human on this planet. And it's not always unicorns and rainbows. And people often say it's about suffering in many ways, the human experience. I do these practices to live more. And that's really what I advocate. This is about living your fullest. It's not to say
Feel
that
more,
you can't.
live more. Mm.
Yeah, it's not that you can't be angry. But if that anger is actually pulling you down into something deeper or something heavier, like guilt and shame cycles, because you're acting out the same way over and over and over again, it's not to say that something won't make you angry or something won't make you sad, and to avoid that feeling or being like, oh, well, I need to just do this and this and this to work through my grief because that will get through it. No, it can be messy and that's okay. But we have these tools to help just lighten the load or to create a new perspective on what we're doing and how we're doing it and finding maybe a better way to move through some things. But it's not about avoidance and it's not about making sure everything is okay, sort of that spiritual bypassing phrase. Everything just happens for a reason. And this style of not dismissing how we're feeling. And I think it's really the opposite. It's actually feeling more, really feeling more, letting yourself feel and move through things and understand it as part of this human experience that we've all signed up for.
Yeah, there's such a subtlety to it. I love that, like the example you used of everything happens for a reason. You can see how that can either be helpful on your path or not at all. You know, it can actually almost be damaging in some way or something like that. But it is pointing at something. It's pointing at a possibility of working with things as well, you know. You mentioned that you had a partner. Do you ever are there tools that you use within your relationships? This might be a bit personal, but do you use breathwork in your relationships? Are there any kind of tools for those of us that have partners and might come across moments of, you know, friction?
Absolutely. We usually do our practice in the morning together. I mean, she works with me at breathpod. Not every morning. We're actually going through a program thing at the moment with my community, and we sit in our bed and do it together, and it feels really nice. In terms of friction, we have our own mechanisms whenever friction comes up. She's an amazing coach. We'll coach each other through it, which is also amazing, but sometimes triggering, saying, I don't want to be coached right now. We usually use laughter. I mean, that's usually our thing that we'll come back to. But I think your partner is always your biggest mirror. Well, it is. He or she. You can learn so much from that person. And where we use breathwork is actually more around connection. And it's not a case of using breathwork to resolve issues. We actually use it for a deeper connection, syncing our breath, doing different breath practices together can really bond you on a deeper level. I mean, she's absolutely amazing.
What would syncing your breath look like? Just facing each other and syncing up the rhythm?
Yeah, exactly that. Depending on the pattern that you're using, you can sit in front of each other. You can even both hands on heart. And then move into a pattern. Now, it might be a connected breath pattern. You can also do sharing breaths, which is breathing just in general is very intimate. We breathe in air, it passes through our body, it goes through our cells, we breathe it out, and somebody else breathes that in. That happens all day long. But when you're actually with somebody and connecting your breath, you're matching not only the breath and the rhythm and the connection of this sort of deep, intimate connection, but you're syncing your heart rhythms. You actually become the energy that you emit. You're in each other's sort of energetic field and your heart space. It's just a very beautiful experience to do.
In New Zealand here, the Maori culture has a greeting known as the hangi. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but you basically, male and female, when you meet somebody, you kind of hold forearms and you bring your third eye and your nose together and you just take a long, slow breath together. And I've always thought, like, what an incredible greeting to have, so different from a handshake.
Yeah. Well, it's like Hawaii as well.
Yeah. Same
Hawaii.
Polynesian cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. Aloha is their greeting, and it's about breath. So
I know that you've worked with groups like Google, which I would guess is maybe a fairly masculine environment with engineers and, maybe a more technical kind of space. And I would imagine you've also worked in spaces that are quite feminine. Are there different entry points for, quite manly men or, quite girly girls, or just the masculine feminine difference there? Or is breathwork for everyone?
breathwork is for everyone. I like to just meet people where they're at. So if you have to tweak the language slightly to resonate with somebody or a crowd, or if I do a lot of it from corporate work, and that could be a room full of analysts, or it could be a room full of creatives, or engineers, and sometimes you just need to tweak things and get on their level. But usually everyone's pretty receptive to what I teach. They're very open. But sometimes I need to maybe lean on the performance side if I'm working with a certain group who are wanting they're in that sort of A-type group, and I'll maybe lean in my approach that way. Or if it's something that I can see is very open and very spiritually aware, then I can lean the conversation that way as well. So it is for everybody. I just want people to really lock in to the benefits and how they can use this themselves. So for that, I often play on that sort of skepticism, like, okay, what's this group? How can I make sure they're fully engaged, and how can I empower them to go, this is amazing. And so I think that's just on delivery.
Stuart, thank you so much. Thank you for taking some time out of your day and for sharing this with us. I know at least 10 times just in this conversation, I've taken a deeper, fuller, more relaxed breath. And I thank you for that and for all the good work you're doing.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Have a great day.
You too.
See you, bro. Okay, good humans. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. If you want to breathe more with breathpod, they've offered us 7 days of full access to their platform to try it out, along with 20% off your first year. And you'll find this and more at the Aroha podcast homepage. So that's aro-ha.com/podcast. Have a look. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you again soon.